Welcome to FreeEduHub. Now today in our course on cloud computing, we'll see migrating to the cloud. So we'll try to understand the concepts which are important if we are planning to shift to the cloud, what things we should consider and what things to be taken care of. Now the key concepts for this chapter is that we'll be talking about what is cloud bursting, we'll see cloud migration, then different frameworks and the reserved instances, etc. And then again we'll talk about vendor lock. The learning objectives for this chapter are we'll define the requirements for an application migrating to the cloud, that what are the requirements if we want to shift certain applications to the cloud. We'll describe the importance of backing up company's data before and after moving the application to the cloud. So if you are planning to shift the data to the cloud, what sort of data you want to keep on premises and what sort of data shall be migrated to the cloud. If you want to keep a copy of it in on-premises databases, or what is the backup timings, how frequent you'll be maintaining the backups, etc. Appreciate the benefit of using the experienced consultants to assist in cloud migration. So just like ERP implementation and stuff, we require the expertise of the consultants who help us in comfortably migrating our services to the cloud. So we'll see that what's the importance of consultants. We'll describe the application in terms of its resources, etc. Then we'll describe and the vendor lock in different ways and how can we avoid it. Describe the importance of training of the employees before using and after the cloud migration, since things would change. Most of the things would be accessed from the servers which are available in the cloud. So what sort of training would be required for that? Then we'll describe the importance of establishing the realistic cloud deployment schedule. We'll be talking about the budget requirements and the potential information technology governance issues related to the cloud. What rules and regulations and compliance requirements you'll have to follow if you're shifting the items to the cloud. And finally, we'll describe the cloud bursting and what's the importance of it. Now moving to the cloud is from a technical perspective, moving to an application to the cloud can happen quickly. Now Migrate Cloud Solution Provider will eagerly assist you by providing the instant access to the cloud-based services or the data storage and support. So mostly the migration is not a difficult process, but if you are shifting your complete infrastructure to the cloud, you'll have to consider lots of things, like if you have the Active Directory on premises and you want to have it in the cloud, what would be the setup for Microsoft Azure, how you want to share the things in the cloud. If you have any other services like the applications which requires authentication using LDAP, etc., how that would be managed. So all those things are part of the migration process. That's like an IT project, the process of moving an application to the cloud or the process of creating and deployment a new cloud application should be well thought out. It means that we are actually planning to move the services in the cloud. We'll even plan that which services shall be moved to the cloud first and which services should be moved after that. So it would be a gradual process. Of course, you'll move the services first which have no dependencies on the other applications and you can comfortably run it in the cloud. Those applications will be migrated first, then the applications that you'll be migrating later. Now there are lots of reasons to migrate to the cloud. For example, reduction or elimination of on-premises data center. We don't want to maintain the data center on premises, and there are lots of costs associated to that, and we have covered it already in the course. So if we are outsourcing or if we are having the things in the cloud, there is a lot of responsibilities that would be shifted to the cloud. Now it would reduce the administrative and operations of the data center cost, that you don't need to maintain the team of professionals on premises who will be looking after the networking, upgrade, migration, backups, and each and everything which is related to a data center. Improved disaster recovery and business continuity plan means that if anything goes wrong, you must have a proper plan to make sure that your services are up and running, and we get a clear advantage if we are moving to the cloud because they are maintaining multiple instances and even the backups in the same region and outside the region. So in case of a natural disaster, your business will not be affected. You'll still be able to continue your services from the cloud. Improved application scalability and robustness means that if in any case, if you want to increase the capacity of your server or the overall requirements which are required for a limited period of time, for example a sales peak period, you can avail the services of the cloud and it would be scaled up to match the requirements which is currently available, or the problems that you are facing at a particular moment of time. Now, cost saving throughout the managed services such as databases as servers, etc. If you have the Microsoft cloud-based services, you'll be paying a negligible price to have the licensing fee of the Microsoft and rest of the operating systems that you have in the cloud. But if you are managing it on premises, you'll have to bear the cost, and you'll have to make sure that the license is updated and applicable to all the services that you are using. Then we have improved services of security when we are moving to the cloud. Now there are different components of the cloud. Whenever we talk about migrating to the cloud, we have applications, we have data, and we have infrastructure. Applications is any sort of applications which is custom built, or any software and service kind of application that you want to host it, or you want to convert it to your own cloud, how you'll be using it. The data related to that, where it would be saved, whether you are saving it on premises or it would be saved in the cloud, and even infrastructure, that what sort of services you want to shift to the cloud completely. Now, moving an application from on-premises to the cloud involves the rehosting it on a server in the cloud. That can include custom web applications, enterprise solutions, like migration from on-premises Exchange server to Microsoft 365. Even if you have a instance of a SAP installed somewhere, or any kind of databases for application, etc., shall be maintained, and in a way that a copy of it is in the cloud and a copy of it can be maintained on premises as well. Infrastructure migration involves moving servers like Active Directory domain servers to the cloud, while the data migration involves the moving the data storage to the cloud, like the solutions of OneDrive and database servers. So if we are talking about Active Directory, as I told you, if we are using Microsoft Azure services and you want to synchronize the data of your Active Directory in the cloud, you'll use Microsoft Azure services for that. And if we are migrating the databases in the cloud, you'll have to make sure that what sort of data is there, and if your applications which are custom written, if they are actually getting the data from on-premises database servers, if you'll migrate it in the cloud, what would be the repercussions of it, and if you'll have to modify certain things in your application, since your database address would change in the cloud and you'll have to provide the address for that. Now there are lots of security features which are associated with that, and you'll have to take care of all those security mechanisms when you are shifting the databases in the cloud. Now, to make sure that the processes are manageable, the components can be migrated at a time, starting with the infrastructure, then data, and finally the application. So you'll have the infrastructure, you'll migrate it, and then you'll migrate the data which is associated with that, and then you'll host the services so that your services can comfortably run in the cloud. After that, we have cloud migration considerations that you must consider, that what kind of business risks you might have if you are shifting the things in the cloud. What are the costs associated to that? Because you'll have to bear in mind that if you are availing the services of a consultant, you'll have to include that price plus the ongoing cost for the cloud services, number of underlying the components, like if any other things which are required in addition to the cloud migration of your current services, what are the security mechanisms and the available personal resources that you have, that if you have a team of professionals available on premises, if they'll be able to comfortably migrate the services, or you'll have to rely on some third-party services. Now, common goals and requirements could be data security and privacy requirements which are there, which you must be concerned about, that how your data is saved in the cloud, and what are the mechanisms. For example, certain countries have certain data storage requirements in the cloud, and certain requirements are there, for example, for the medical records and national ID card details, and even the student data in certain part of the world where it is required that the data should be maintained of the students and related records on premises or within the country. So you'll have to follow the compliance and regulatory requirements for that. Site capacity plan, what resources will the application initially need to operate. So you'll have to plan the the resources, make sure that they are available so that you are comfortably able to offer those services, and your potential customers are not affected by that. Scalability requirements, what measurable factors should drive scaling the events. That for example, you have a medium range of server available in the cloud, but you know that you have a sales period coming up, and usually you get very high sales in that specific time period. So what are the rules and regulations for that, how you will plan it well ahead of time so that you'll have the rapid elasticity available on that. Now, system uptime requirements, a cloud provider must be able to match your site uptime requirements. They'll tell you that our uptime is, for example, 99.999%, that we are mostly available, and you can even gauge that what are the backup mechanisms and uptime of the cloud service provider before choosing a cloud service provider. Now, business continuity and disaster recovery, as I told you that in case of a disaster, what's the plan that if everything goes down and if people are not able to reach the cloud service provider, how you'll make sure that the same services can be rendered from on-premises. The budget requirements are talking about the money or the cash would be required in order to make sure that you can comfortably migrate the services in the cloud and then sustain it on the longer period of time. You'll have to plan the budget accordingly, that for example you are availing 3 or 5 servers in the cloud at the moment, but as the organization would grow, how many more servers would be required in the cloud, and how you'll manage it. Operating system and programming language requirements, what sort of operating systems are required in order to host your services in the cloud. If for example you are you need a specific operating system on which you are hosting your application, whether that operating system is supported with the cloud service provider or not. Then the type of the cloud, for example you are going for public, private or hybrid cloud. Single all multi-tenant solution requirements, that you want to have a dedicated server on which only your application will be running, or you want to host your application on a server where other applications of other customers are also hosted, and you are availing a part of the services from that specific server. Or the data backup requirements, what are they, and how frequently he'll be maintaining, the cloud service provider would be maintaining the backup, and if you have easy access to download the data whenever you want to download it from the client. Now, client device requirements, like what devices such as PC, tablets, smartphone must be applications, or must the application support. That if you are getting a software as a service, a cloud-based solution, if that service is provided you facility to use the tablet or smartphones in order to access their services. Just like for Google services, you can access Google Cloud or Google Drive from the PC as well as from the handheld devices. If there are any training requirements, you'll have to have the budget requirements for that as well, that if you want to train your staff on premises, or you want to have specialized services to provide training to your staff on those lines. Now, governance and auditing requirements means, as I told you, that if you need to have the data saved on the on-premises, or how you'll plan it so that you'll have the appropriate measures for that, making sure that data is available as per the government rules and requirements. Open source software requirements, some application believe that open source based cloud based reduce the risk of the vendor lock, because they think that if we have developed an application on a specific platform like Microsoft, Google, or VMware, will not be able to move to the other cloud, and there are certain requirements that you'll have to match in so that your application is not locked with one cloud service provider, and if you want to shift those services from one cloud service provider to another, you must be comfortably able to do that. Programming application interface requirements, if they are providing APIs in order to authenticate your services or the databases, or in order to get data from the other cloud service providers. A very dedicated and complete dashboard for reporting requirements, where you can see the overall strength of your servers and the data which is coming in, what are the peak times and the load times, so that you can plan the scalability requirements accordingly. Client access rights requirement, that if clients can access it comfortably, and if you want to block certain areas where you don't want your website to be available, you'll be able to do that. Data export requirements. Make sure that the cloud service provider let you export all your data in an event that you need to cease the operations and to move the solution to a different cloud provider. It's not like you'll have to open a ticket to get the data. Whenever you want, you must be able to download your data from the cloud service provider anytime. Now leverage a framework. A framework provides a basic structure for the items or process. A framework may be as simple as a document that contains step-by-step instructions for performing a task, a checklist of key operations which should be performed. So there is usually a manual with the help of which it is telling the clients as well as the employees in the organization that how you'll be using the services once they are migrated to the cloud. So sometimes it's the requirement of the consultant to provide all the written documentation available to the employees before they will migrate the services. Now that's a Microsoft website to cloud adoption framework for Azure, etc. They are giving a complete detailed information on it, that what you should consider if you are shifting your items to the cloud. Now, working with vendors means that evaluating different vendor solutions is necessary when migrating to the cloud, that what are different features and software solutions they are providing, if they are using any AI tools in order to migrate the data from on-premises to the cloud, and how good are their tools if they are able to migrate the data from SQL Server to Oracle and vice versa, etc. So it means that cross-platform compatibility shall be there. Now, organizations such as Gartner will provide evaluation and ratings of the vendors with the cloud solutions. So Gartner is a very well-known name in the market which is evaluating different vendors and the solutions which are provided by them, which makes it easy for you to easily make a decision that if you want to keep your services with one cloud service provider or another. Reviewers can be used to confirm the research findings. So people would be giving their feedback on the listings of Gartner, that which cloud service provider is a best suited for that specific niche of business. So people usually review it and you can get the details from there. Now, requests for information, RFIs, or requests for proposals, which RFPs, can be created to specify requirements and receive the vendor responses. That's a normal process if you're purchasing anything from the cloud service provider, or even if you're purchasing certain items for your organization. Now, proof of concept and proof of value can be requested from the narrowed down vendor list to demonstrate how solution works to value these services over there. Now, know your migration and success criteria. Cost saving is a capital or operational expense with the performance, and you must also consider the reduced administration and labor since it would be in the cloud. You must rely on the services which are provided by the cloud service provider. Improved business continuity plan will be there, and reduced latency and improved throughput would be there since the cloud service providers are making sure that their services are globally available to the customers without having any problems. Now, the system uptime and availability plays an important role as well. Further, protect your existing data. Back up your data completely before starting the migration process, so that in case if there is any problem, you have a backup of your data available with you. Agree with your cloud provider on the backup and procedures they'll use after they'll take the control of your data, that how frequently they will be maintaining the backup of the data. If your company has specific privacy requirements, like your provider state that their data privacy policies and procedures in writing, that these are our terms and conditions, they'll tell that what kind of encryption mechanisms they are maintaining, where they are maintaining the backups, where will be the primary backup, where would be the secondary backup. All those things are provided by the cloud service provider in writing, so that it's a legal requirement which they'll be following and you will be following with them. Now, cloud providers may host the data on servers outside the US to reduce the cost, but high privacy data may have the requirements to stay in US. So, for example, if you are maintaining a data in a way where if you are hosting it outside your country, maybe it would be a bit cheaper, go for that, but make sure that there is no data hosted on the servers outside your country for which you have strict requirements from the government that the data should remain within the country. Now that's the Google's migration plan. Just like we saw the framework for Microsoft, they have their own set of instructions that you must follow. Just to be clear with everyone, that if you want to shift the services to Google Cloud, what would be the requirements for that? Now, leverage a consultant. Moving the cloud involves many options and potential pitfalls. Many companies offer consultants who are knowledgeable about the cloud migration process. So definitely you must take the benefit of the consultancy services if you don't have a team of professionals available who are confident that they will be comfortably able to migrate the services to the cloud. Now, engaging a consultant before migration can save money to avoid cost and mistakes, etc. You don't want to experiment on the migration process, and at the end, once everything stops working, then you'll have to get the services. It would give a very bad reputation to your company. Further, maybe the consultants would charge you more in order to fix all those problems, because if they'll plan it accordingly and then they are migrating the services, it's a bit easy for them to easily or smoothly move towards the migration of services. Now, consultants provide a checklist and a framework to improve the probability of the success of the migration. So they'll have a number of meetings with you just to know the critical factors and the things which are important to move to the cloud first before they can plan and give you a complete detailed sheet of the migration and project details, that by this time we'll be able to do these things, broken down into steps, so that you know that by the end of this month how many services would be migrated to the cloud. Now, you know your application's attributes. For example, demand periods. Does the application have periods of high and low demand, such as if the duty hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., you'll not disturb it during that time, but after the duty hours, you would plan the migration process so that it is not affecting the customers and your employees. Average users, how many typical users would use the system simultaneously. So it's not only about that how many users are there, but you'll have to calculate as well that how many users would be using it at the same time, so that they can calculate the capacity planning of the servers, etc., and they'll depute the resources accordingly. Disk storage requirements. What is the application typical disk storage method? Are the files permanently or temporarily stored on the storage? Are the most important operations read or write? So both things are important when you are deciding for databases, as we talk about IOPS in the databases. So you'll have to calculate that what is the kind of storage you need, whether it would be a SAS storage, you want a NVMe or SSD, and if the data is stored temporarily or permanently, or how many times you are reading or writing to the database. Further, the storage requirements as well, that what's the application database requirements and the database replication in the real time, how much data would be going to it, how much data would be read from it, how many data would be written to it, how much would be replicated. So all those things are considered. Now, RAM use, what is the application range of physical and virtual memory available on premises, and what is the requirements that you would like to have it in the cloud. Now, bandwidth consumption as well, that what is the application bandwidth requirement. If you are a website which is constantly uploading and getting the videos, etc., what are the requirements for that, and how much bandwidth would be required on your servers to easily manage the data which is coming. Now, caching, how does the application currently cache the data, how it's maintaining it when it is hosted on the cloud-based service provider, and what is the cache limit for that application. Security, does your application have a unique security for the data privacy considerations, or you are following the standards. Encryption mechanism, how will the cloud service provider encrypt the data in the transit, or it is at rest. So there are two ways you can back up or encrypt the data. One is that you can encrypt the data on the move, like once the data would move to the storage, it would be encrypted. The other thing is that the data which is on the hard disk, that would be encrypted only. Further, it should be considered that what is the encryption mechanism used over there. Some of the cloud providers even give you the option to choose the kind of encryption algorithm that you want to have for your services. Network considerations are, does the application have unique network considerations such as specific port or firewall configurations, that you'll have to plan it accordingly. And then API, do your application require API access to access the data in the cloud. Now, if you remember, we talked about vendor lock-in in managing the cloud as well. Vendor lock-in happens when a company is unable to switch to another provider or a cloud service provider. Maybe you have developed certain applications on Google Cloud and those services are not available with Microsoft, for example. So that is considered as a lock-in because you cannot easily migrate your services to any other service provider. This lock-in can happen when a vendor fails to fulfill the service level agreements as well. So if they agreed something and they are not able to render those services and you have developed the application on their platform, it is also considered a vendor lock-in because the party did not comply with the service level agreement. The vendor may take it different to export the data or provide capabilities that the competitors don't have. So you'll have to see that what are the services which are provided by the competitor. Also, cloud service providers should make it easy for the companies to switch the providers if they fail to meet the service level agreement requirements. So all that information is usually available on the internet, that if you want to shift your services from one cloud service provider to another, what are the requirements for that. Now we'll see the leveraging help desk as a service. Now, leveraging help desk as a service, for example, if you are using any cloud-based service for help desk services, etc., just like Ayoko, what would be the requirements for that? And since they are providing everything which is hosted in the cloud, you'll be comfortably able to provide customer service using that. Now, training is a key to the migration success. Employees' preparedness for the software as a service solution. So, if you are migrating or the help desk services, for example, to the cloud, your employees will be accessing those services in the cloud. So what are the training requirements for them if they can comfortably access the services in the cloud, because they are developed for all customers and you'll have to learn how to use the services. Develop the training for the solutions, for example, APIs, etc., administrator training for the cloud-based operations, that who are the administrators who are taking care of the application. There will be a dedicated training for them, a normal training for the employees, and maybe a customer service training for the division who's looking after all the complaints and other things. Now, IT audit group training and corporate governance issues and internal controls must be provided, and even the help desk support preparedness and training is provided. Business continuity and disaster recovery training is also part of it. Now, you must have a realistic deployment schedule. Despite of the quick deployment of the cloud solution, it is important to set a deployment schedule that allows for training, testing, and benchmarking. So enough time should be there that once it is implemented, there should be in parallel training program which is going on. The application shall be tested at different levels. So just to make sure that it is performing just like it used to do it on premises, and even there shall be certain benchmarks that you must have completed the deployment process by the end of this time as well. Now, organizations moving to the cloud for the first time with the new application may establish a beta-like release schedules rather than the feedback from the employees. So the organizations would be planning that if the application is shifted to the cloud, they'll test it in the beta version of it first. They'll gather the feedback from the employees. Maybe they need certain improvements in it before they'll proceed to the next step. Now, testing periods can provide the time for establishing the system performance benchmarks, and even when planning a cloud migration, establish a roadmap for the outline of the key migration task and subtasks. So as I told you, you'll define the most important task and then you'll shift them one by one to the cloud. Now consider frameworks like Microsoft Cloud Adaptation Framework or Amazon Web Services Cloud Migration Strategy and the processes which are required for that. Then there are 5 R's of migration. Whenever we consider to migrate the services to the cloud, it's rehost, revise, refactor, rebuild, and replace. And let's try to understand what are they. Rehost means a simple lift and shift to move a solution from an on-premises server into the cloud. So if you want to host it from the servers which were available on premises and now you're shifting it to the cloud, what would be the requirements for that? Revise means the modification of existing code as necessary for the code to run within the cloud. If you have the database on premises and the application on premises, it is very easy to communicate with that. But if you are hosting it in the cloud, what are the requirements? What are the security principles? What is the reachability? functionality, you'll have to revise all those things. Maybe in the application you'll have to update the data in order to make sure that your connection string is now pointing to the database which is in the cloud. Refactor means rewriting the existing code to improve the quality and the functionality of the code before migrating the solution to the cloud. Sometimes it happens that you'll have to rewrite the code so that it better understands the other application on the other end, maybe a different database, maybe the application which is hosted in a different platform, how it would be working in the cloud. Now rebuild means the discarding the current code for a new implementation before migrating the solution to the cloud. Sometimes the cloud service provider would provide you a better solution than the one which is available on premises, and if you are writing the application in that, you can rebuild the application and discard the code and other things which were quite obsolete, but you can use a part of that as in the new application as well. Replace means that the replacement of an existing solution with the commercial solution. For example, as we saw software as a service, or if we are providing help desk support through TeamViewer, etc. Since you are using their services, your help desk or the application that you wrote on premises, if that's not as good, you can completely replace it with the services which are provided by the cloud service provider. Now revisit the budget motivators. For example, current data center cost breakdown, which may include on-premises data center, how much rent you are paying, the power and air conditioning cost, co-location cost, server cost, data storage cost, network cost, and the other things like payroll cost for existing site administrators, their projection, if any possible reduction or opportunities are required, or the training that you are providing them, how much money you are spending on it, current cost of the software licensing, any sort of VMware, Microsoft, or database licensing that you are using. And it should be compared. If you'll shift it to the cloud, what would be the fallback of it, how much you'll save, and how much you'll have to pay in terms of an ongoing cost. The current payroll cost for the patch management and software version update, so there will be a person who's responsible for all those things to make sure that all servers are updated with all the patches, etc. And the current hardware and maintenance costs which are required in on-premises data centers. Now consider reserved instances. One of the primary advantage to leverage the cloud is the ability to scale the application on demand. So the application should be adjusted according to the requirements and the traffic which is coming on it. When you must scale the application, you will typically pay the full price for the new resource. So keep in mind that you'll have to pay the amount for the services that you are getting in the cloud. To reduce such potential cost, many of the cloud providers support the concept of reserved instances, for which a customer will commit to a specific use of a given period of time, that okay, if there is a demand, it can automatically expand, which is we call as elastic computing. We'll be able to utilize the services for that time, and you'll be billed for that time for which you utilize the extra instances, just to make the services easy and easily reachable to your customers. In exchange, the cloud service provider will significantly discount the additional resources that you have. And before you select a cloud service provider, consider the financial benefits and the leveraging reserved instances, etc. So what are the charges if, for example, you are utilizing more services than required, or if you would ask them to give additional resources for the services that you have, how much it would be billed, whether it would be on daily basis, hourly basis, minute basis, second basis, what is their plan, so you can plan it accordingly. Now use a governance plan. Governance plans is identify how the cloud solution aligns with the business strategy, identify and define the internal and external controls for the company will need within the application, and what control points in order to validate the applications performing correctly in free to possible external modifications. So if it is hosted in the cloud, whether you need to modify it from time to time, or you'll have to check that if it is constantly performing as you expect it to perform, and there are no anomalies in terms of data and the application and the overall speed of the data which is extracted from the database. Describe the risk of the IT staff in trying to mitigate the waste. The cloud may help them to do so. So if the IT staff needs to get certain details about the statistics, etc., most of the things are available on the dashboards which are there in the cloud, but the cloud service provider can help you on that as well. Now describe who within the organization must have access to the data within the cloud and how. So there are limited guys, just like on premises, who will have the access to the data, who will be able to update the data, delete, modify, backup, import, export. So you'll have to define that who's the person who will have access to all those things. Describe who within the cloud solution provider in the organization will have to the access, and determine how the cloud provider logs the errors and system events and how those logs are made available to you. So if there are set rules and dashboard through which you can view it, or there are any alerts that if something critical happens, it would automatically inform you that something is happening and you must pay attention to that. Determine how and when the cloud provider performs system updates and patches. So you must be able to see that how frequently the database service provider or the cloud service provider is patching the systems, just to make sure that your application and things are safe in the cloud. Discover which performance monitoring tools the cloud service provider are using. Maybe you can extract a part of the data for the logs and things, and if they are using a specific tool, you can have it on premises as well, where you can export the data from the cloud, import it in your application, and run your own set of calculations on the data. Now, leveraging the cloud bursting means that the cloud can scale on demand to meet user needs, and some companies are using the cloud bursting to expand their on-site applications into the cloud during the period of high demand. This is especially useful for the seasonal or event-driven demand, such as during the natural disasters. So if, for example, they had an issue, they are maintaining a backup in the cloud, but in case something goes down on site, they'll be able to run their services from the cloud because the data was, or the backup of the data was in the cloud. They have some reserved servers in the cloud. If on site things are not working, they'll immediately shift to the services in the cloud. Now, change management is a key, and it plays an important role that you'll have to change the perception and mindset of the customers as well as of the employees, that even migration to the cloud is in benefit to the organization itself. You'll have to plan the change, identify the threats and the ways to mitigate them, that what are the potential threats if we will shift to the cloud. The threats could be according to the data, backup, downtime, security issues, and all those things related to that. Creating a strategy and vision for the change, that if you are planning for a change, what would be the planning for that, how you'll execute it, and identifying the short-term wins, that how you'll achieve the targets. So that was about the chapter on migrating to the cloud. What we covered in this chapter is that how moving an application to the cloud requires proper planning and definition and requirements, etc. Defining system roles and requirements at the first step of migrating the application. Then we look at the security is a primary requirement for any application, and it's important to ensure that the cloud service provider security policies meet the compliance and other requirements. Using a consultant who has successfully migrated the application to the cloud will be beneficial. Vendor lock-in should be avoided or kept in mind before selecting a vendor, and the training is a key aspect in every cloud migration and should be planned for the budgeted, and the IT governance should be aligned with the migration policies and procedures. Cloud bursting allows an application to scale temporarily into and out of the cloud as it is required. So that's it for today as far as migrating to the cloud is concerned. Thank you very much.